Yeah, so psychosynthesis is a psychology that was developed by Robert Assagioli, and he aligned really well with Jung and his principles, incorporating both like traumatic experiences, like what Freud focused on, as well as the transpersonal. So it's like this really holistic view that brings in both lower aspects as well as higher aspects.
Okay. So how is that really, is it very much different than Jungarian psychology in some ways? Because I know, because I was looking at this and I was looking, there's some similarities. Now, was he somebody who studied under Jung? And then that's where some of this stuff, because there seems to be a little bit of overlay when it came to the two types of psychology on that. Is there a
Mhm.
little bit of overlay on that?
Yeah, it is. They actually work together. So
Okay.
they worked closely together and had a lot of ideas that were similar. Um, there's there are some differences in psychosynthesis. The will is really prominent. It's the person is the will. We're not just willing, we are will beings. And there's a couple of other differences, but they do align a lot.
Yeah. Like I was
Um,
noticing that too as well. So when somebody comes to see you, like what are the because this I'm trying to go at this as a person who really starts wants to start their healing journey and they're
mhm.
looking for a life coach. So when I decide to show up for one of your sessions, what can I expect?
Yeah, so one of the first things that needs to be dived into is subpersonalities, and in
Okay.
coaching it might not just we might not talk about a subpersonality or name it, but it's really diving into the lower aspects, getting to know what their goals are and what's underneath a lot of the things that are blocking them. Like a lot of times there's limiting beliefs and change your thoughts and all those things, but where are those thoughts coming from? Where does that originate? And understanding what's underneath that can be really powerful to help with the transformation.
Yeah, that sounds so profound. And because I think so many people, I think this is kind of one of the things I wanted to mention is about that spiritual bypass, not really going
Hmm.
deep under those layers and kind of just
Right.
using spirituality to kind of mask the pain of not going in and looking inward on that. So let's talk about subpersonalities because one of the things I find really interesting is we talk about subpersonalities as separate from us, but they're actually part of us. Can we
Yes,
maybe,
yes.
yeah? So maybe can we talk a little bit more about what subpersonalities are? So really, so somebody's listening to this, can you really get an idea of what we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So subpersonalities are a part of our personality that are fragmented. A lot of times people will try to push away these negative aspects of themselves. Say you have an inner critic or something like that. You try to disown it. So it's in psychosynthesis, there is no fixing or anything like that. It is really trying to integrate and understand those parts to be more whole. And so these subpersonalities come out in different ways. I mentioned the inner critic, there's the perfectionist, and when you really start to deepen into this work, you can get into some really interesting ones. Like I have the goof off gal that wants no responsibilities. So you can really start to like understand these different parts of yourself. But that's all that they are, just like these parts of yourself, but they often can take over. So, when I talk about myself, I can be embodied in one of my subpersonalities that has its own set of beliefs, its own set of thoughts, its own way of perceiving the world. And so a lot of times when we have inner conflict going on, it's because there's two different subpersonalities that don't fully agree. And so in understanding them, you can kind of see what's going on within yourself and deepen into the knowing of what's happening and why you have these conflicts.
Yeah, like I mean, I
Yeah.
think myself, I'm just listening to that and going, "Yep, that makes sense." Yeah, I've had inner conflict all the time. It is almost like that story about the two wolves. It's which one are you going to feed? Which one's
Hmm.
going to take over? And there's always this constant battle,
Hmm.
between those fragmented selves, and then who your own personality, who you think you are. But it's sometimes the sub personalities that seem to be running the show and you don't
Hmm.
realize that because we go unconscious, we go asleep, basically we're kind of walking zombies in some ways, you're kind of looking at that. So how do we get fragmented? So how does that whole process start?
Yeah, so subpersonalities usually originate from some kind of maybe trauma, maybe not like a big trauma, but just a part of us that was hurt. So the inner critic is maybe coming from a place of fear, or I have like the historian that keeps record of all my wrongs, all the times that things didn't go right. And so to try to keep me safe, it's like, remember that one time that you didn't follow through and you didn't do these things? Maybe you shouldn't even try to start this because it's not going to work out. And so
Mm,
really where these subpersonalities originate are from like, core wounds, fears, traumas, things like that. So in essence, they really are trying to serve us, but in a lot of ways they're just limiting us.
yeah.
So yeah,
So is that one of the main reasons why people get stuck in life?
I think so. I think coming to an understanding of like what's going on underneath all these layers can really help you grow and like get out of that stuck, break through those limiting beliefs and just evolve as a person.
Yeah. So what type of traumas would cause that or even hurts? So is this basically similar to like family of origin stuff where it's just based on, your childhood issues as you're growing up because we're so
Mhm.
malleable at that age that everything just kind of feeds right into the subconscious and we tell ourselves. So like if your parent yells at you, there's that some type of shame or something comes up because of that, or it's their own influence on that. So how much of your parental things, because this is one of the things I've always understood, sometimes difficulty understanding, but also challenging. It's, how much of the influence of your parents and your environment actually affect your personality.
I think a lot. A lot of mine that I've experienced come from, younger parts where like the perfectionist, for example, I think it can start young where you get scolded or you didn't do something right or you have a crazy parent when you're playing sports. Fortunately, that's not my experience, but that's how these kind of evolve. And then as you get older, it's reinforced, so you go through similar experiences and it keeps happening and it turns into a belief. So yeah, a lot of times it comes from these early parts of life and then just is reinforced later and it just becomes deeper and deeper and you identify with that subpersonality more. So you feel like you are that part of yourself and not realizing that you are the inner observer behind all of that. And these are just parts of yourself. You start to really identify and feel like that is who you are. That is your experience. That defines you. When reality, it doesn't define you. It's just a part of you that needs to be understood and
Yeah.
integrated. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like this kind of big misunderstanding of who we are and what we're doing and how we can come to terms with it because it could be such an eye opener at the same time too, but there's part of your aspect that kind of goes, I know for myself when I started my journey and started doing my inner work, it's like fuck this. This is not fun. Like you
Mhm.
just notice all these things that you don't know about yourself. But then when your therapist starts going, "Oh, by the way, this
Mhm.
is," and you kind of look and go, wait a minute, am I a rescuer? Oh my God. And you don't realize that you do it. You kind of go in this automatic programming when you talk to me. And that's one of my sub personalities. I'm the rescuer. Of course, I'm going to fully admit that. I always want to help everybody, want to heal everybody. And when I'm focusing on somebody else's problems, I'm not focusing on my own. And for
Yeah.
so many years, I didn't know I had all these needs that weren't getting met. And I just thought, okay, I just didn't like, and again, this is part of it. It just wasn't allowing myself to express those needs because I never knew what my needs were because I was always taking care of somebody. I was always taking
Mhm.
care of the family. I was always taking care of my mother and all her emotional needs. So all my emotional needs were never met. So I just came
Yeah.
into that identity and it took me a long time to figure that out. And sometimes I still get caught in it, but I'm more conscious of it when I'm in it. And then I can kind of step back and, okay, hold on here. You can't heal the whole world. I know you want to heal the whole world. You can't heal the whole world, so just kind of pulling it back. So part of your coaching, is it really trying to help people recognize some of those sub personalities?
Yes, yeah. So that's identification, which is really big in psychosynthesis. And this can be disidentification from like a subpersonality. So stepping back into the loving observer or the inner witness, different, terms for that. But really just taking that step back and realizing that this is separate from me and I understand how it's operating, but it doesn't need to control me. I don't need to make choices from this part. I can choose to act more aligned and I can let it inform me, but it doesn't mean that it needs to take over.
Yeah. Do you find like it's almost like an addiction? It's kind of like this personality is you're almost addicted to becoming or being this type of person that you sometimes have no, it feels like you have no control. Has anybody ever talked to you about that aspect of it?
I haven't thought about it in terms of addiction, but I certainly think that we can feel so strongly about it or even enjoy being that like subpersonality. It's like the rescuer, you might get a lot of joy from helping people. And so you kind of, it feeds you in a way. Um, yeah, it can just contribute to you and it's that cycle. Then you can kind of get stuck in it.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
I know myself, like sometimes like, they always talk about how the victim is such a big mentality nowadays, and everybody seems to be in their victim and using that. And they
Mhm.
kind of feed and feel this power of being victimized all the time by external circumstances. Though their victimization may have happened early in childhood, they're still living through that and using those wounds to create power around them that they feel powerless. And somehow they can actually use that to make themselves more powerful. But in the end, it's just the opposite. It makes them less powerful because they're using that. And they kind of, it almost seems like they're addicted to that power that they get from that. And I just noticed it over these last couple of years. I just see more and more people being in that victim mentality state and being, I would call it almost addicted to that personality state, and
Mhm.
say that's their mentality and that's who they are, their personality. But there's so much more to that.
Yeah, I think that for that, that's kind of like spiritual bypassing because when you're the victim, you're in the right. You're not doing anything wrong and you're not contributing to the problem. Everything's happening to you, right? So you don't need to own responsibility of anything. So I think that's where a lot of the bypassing comes in because it's really difficult to sit down with yourself and say, hey, okay, these are the way in which I've hurt people that I love most. Like it's really difficult for you to sit with that. There's this quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it's something to the effect of self-love is taking your shame out for coffee, or sitting with your guilt over dinner, or lying with your regret at night. And I think that's so powerful, but it's like you said, it's difficult. Like people don't want to do that. And so the
Mm-mm.
victim is just like, okay, I'm going to do this so that I don't have to own any of that. It's what everybody else is doing to me, and I have no responsibility in it.